Well, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to have Brian Murphy with me today. We're starting our new series called Sportsmen of Rhodesia. So this is the very first interview we're doing. And I really can't think of a better guy to start with than Brian. An absolute colossus in the history of Rhodesian rugby, both on the field as a coach and an administrator. Few people put as much into the game as Brian did. Brian, I get a little bit emotional, but when I look back, you guys, the sportsmen of Rhodesia, I think played an incredibly important part in giving us this very strong national identity that we had, that made us, I think, a more potent little country than we would have been. It was our sportsmen that gave us so much to be proud of. And I think we all owe you guys a hell of a debt of gratitude for making us so proud. And I know it's taken its toll on you physically. You put a lot in. You've played with physically in a big way. I know all the operations you had and stuff. But thank you for all you did for us as young Rhodesians. You really filled our lives with so much excitement and pride. And so, as I say, a real privilege to have you talk to me today. Well, welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Hannes. That was a bit flattering.
Brian, I just wanted, before we get on to anything else, I read the obituary today for our Mike Proctor in the Telegraph. And I know he wasn't a Rhodesian, but I feel like he was very much part of our whole history, our sporting history. You must have known Mike Proctor quite well. Just anything to say about Mike Proctor?
Oh, yeah, I knew him very well from when he first came there. Lovely guy, dedicated sportsman, trained hard, worked hard, did everything for the team. No, he was a great inspiration for us Rhodesians at the time.
He really did. I seem to remember when he came, Rhodesian cricket, I think, was a little bit in the doldrums. And
Yeah,
he really sparked the life back into the game and took cricket up a notch.
well, he certainly did. He got hold of people like Jimmy Mitchell and Ray Gripper was waning a bit. In fact, he took over from Ray as captain, but Ray stayed on the side and actually did better after he lost the captaincy. It was so nice to go and watch Procky play
Yeah.
and for Rhodesia. And he considered himself a Rhodesian at the time, definitely. He did everything that we did, put it that way.
Yes, I did read somewhere or on an interview. He said that those years in Rhodesia were some of the best years of his life. He absolutely loved the 6 or 7 years he was in the country, and he really made a massive contribution to cricket in the country.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, they called Gloucestershire Proctorshire. And we didn't have a name for it in Rhodesia, so it just stayed as and Procky stayed as Procky, yeah.
Well, bless him, Brian. Very sad to see him go, but we'll
Very
miss him,
sad.
and he's certainly left a hell of a legacy behind.
Definitely, absolutely.
Brian, back to you. Just a little bit about the Murphy family and how the family came to Rhodesia.
My father was born in South Africa, as was my mother. And they both, when they got married, they immigrated to Rhodesia with my then gran, whose husband had died, and the 4 kids, her 2 brothers, sister, and herself, motored up to Rhodesia and settled there. And then met my dad, who was staying at my gran's B&B. So that's how they met, and obviously got married, and they never left Rhodesia. My dad died at a young age, 63, and my mom died a couple of years back now at 94. So,
Wow, yes.
Life, yeah.
Right, but Salisbury was home. You were born in Salisbury, you went to school. Where did you go to junior school?
Junior school was St. Michael's, St. George's, who then didn't like me that much. So then I went to PE.
And your contemporaries at PE, Brian?
Uh, St. George's guys were people like Rob Berry, who played cricket for Western Province for many years, wicketkeeper. Pip Maxwell, Dermot O'Day. Funny enough, he lives down in Neisner now too. Saw him the other day. Duncan Clark. Those were the St. George's boys. Then our PE guys were Bert Robertson, and Ian Robertson was a junior to us, but we were in the same boarding house.
Yes.
And then he actually came to live with us when he left school at my mum's house. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about him later. But Brian, your first game for first team at PE, how old were you?
I would have been 17. Yes. Yeah. PE, you couldn't go into an age group above yourself. So you played under 16, and then the next age group was first team down to 10th team.
And any notables in that team, your first games for PE first?
Yeah, Bert Robertson was in that team.
Right.
Mick Graham, who played centre, he played for the Army side because he went into Army when he left school.
Right.
And that would be it, yeah.
So was Ian Robertson younger than you?
Yeah, 2 years younger.
2 years younger. So how many years firsts, Brian?
For me, 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And on the flank or eighth man?
Eighth man. In fact, I started off at centre, and then coach, a guy called Keith Yowes, a brilliant guy, Welshman. And he said, no, you go into the forwards and do some work. You're doing nothing where you are. So that was it. Eighth man, sort of after 3 games, I think, maybe 4. Then went to eighth man, and that's where I stayed for the rest of the year and the following year. Yeah.
Brian, John Breedenkamp, was he your vintage, or was he ahead of you?
No, he was ahead of me. He was 1960 he left, so he was 5 years ahead of me, yeah.
And tell me, and try and be honest, how many games did you lose in those 2 years that you played for PE?
In our last year at PE, we lost 1 game to Churchill, and we drew with them the return game. The year before that, we lost, I think, about 3 or 4. Yeah. But my last year at school, we had no stars in the side. It was an ordinary side, and we just got down. We used to practice at night.
Really?
We just loved playing around with the ball. So it was a very happy team. Yeah.
And games against Umtali, do you remember how you fared?
Yeah, very well. The first one, as I say, which was 64, Umtali had a great side. You had Hobbins,
Okay.
the other front row. It was a good side, very good side, and they gave us a good hiding in 64 and 65. Yeah.
Okay, and Brian, then
Neil
after
came in
Neil
at
Krill,
65.
yes. And so did you play Rhodesia schools?
I don't think we had Rhodesia. No, PE wasn't allowed to go. We had been on a tour to Durban, so no PE guys were allowed to be eligible for Rhodesian schools.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but that's a fact. Yeah.
And so, Brian, then after school, what happens next?
Well, I went to the Army in 66, April of 66. And we played there, and Bert Robertson was in the same intake as I was. And we played for the Army side, which got good hidings from Old Miltonians, Queens, and even BAC. Yeah. So, and then went back at the end of Army 66. We came out in November, I think it was October or November, and went back and joined Old Boys and started there.
Brian, and those games down in Bulawayo, was Des van Jaarsveld still playing then, or was he?
Yes, he was still playing front row then for Old
Was he?
Miltonian. They had a great side. That was the top side in the league. Yeah, and theirs was loose head prop, yes.
And Ronnie Hill, the Springbok, was he around?
Yeah, he was hooker. Yep. Geez, they had a hell of a side. I think they put 70 points on us on the Army side.
Jeez.
They were, yeah. Jimmy Stobbs, another one who was in the set. Dux Daisel, no, Joe Daisel at fullback. Kingsley went on the one wing.
Right.
Became a ref and moved up
Yes.
to Salisbury then.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, they had hell of a team. Yeah.
So Brian, back to Old Boys, and you then very much part of making Old Boys a force to be reckoned with in club rugby.
Well, I was part of a process. We as PE guys joined there, but then it became combined Old Boys, which meant anybody who was an old guy could come and join. So we got people from Alan Wilson, St. George's, Churchill, came to Old Rhodesian, which then became combined Old Boys. And we had a lot of great players that came through there. And it was a very happy club and a nice time to play. Yeah. It's always nice to be when you're winning, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, Brian, your first game for Rhodesia?
1967, the year I joined Old Boys. I think Rhodesia had 3 games that year, and the last game was against France. And I played in that game against France, against one of the all-time greats, Benoit Dugas, was the 8th man.
And Walter Spanghero?
Yeah, Walter and Claude, his brother, both played against us, the Rhodesian game. Great players. Jeez, they had a great side. Canberra Vera on the wing was the captain. It was just a lovely side. I mean, they gave us. I think we were 5-3 up at half time, and I think we lost eventually 40-something 8. Yeah, wow. Something like that. It was a big score, and they actually won 1, lost 3 against South Africa. And South Africa was very, very strong then in 67. They had a great side, Frick Dupree, John Williams, a hell of a good side, yeah.
Just talking about that era, Pete Craylan, did you play with him at all in Rhodesia before he went to South Africa?
No, okay. I think Pete left in 62 to go to South 62 or 63, I'm not 100% sure. I used to see a lot of Pete here play golf with him, and we used to work in the same complex. So, yeah, a great guy, and still plays good golf, and yeah, lovely player though. Wow.
Yeah, he was. It was that great pair with Jan Ellis.
Yes, yeah.
They played for South Africa for some years, formidable loose forwards. Brian, and so the French was your first game for Rhodesia?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that was my first.
And just name a few of the players in that team that year. I'm just trying to get my head around that vintage. Who was the fly-off? Was it Neil Jardine?
Ian Bond. And he got injured in that game, and that was the end of Ian, funny enough. And he, funny enough, lives down here as well. So I see him occasionally. Yeah, he lives in Nature's Valley. Yeah.
Brian, now that you mentioned Ian Bond, just a question I've asked you before, and I love asking the old players this question, but the best fly-off that you think ever played for Rhodesia, who was that?
Unquestionably Ian Bond. Certainly in what I saw playing and afterwards, Ian Bond was in a class all of his own. There was nobody to compare with in Rhodesia with him. Yeah,
Brian, just tell us what the special qualities he had that made him so exceptional a player.
Well, he was very fast. I mean, if he got into a half gap, it was a try because nobody would catch him. He was just phenomenally fast. He had great feet, could sidestep both sides equally as good. And he had great hands and he could kick well. So he was an all-round fly half. And, Pete Versaki was his opposition at the time. And Pete got the game only because the selectors, and I talked to a couple of them over the years, and only because they were scared Ian Bond was going to get injured. And in those days, if you had an injury, you couldn't replace a person. So that's what they got. Ian Kirkpatrick, who was a flank, he said that Ian Bond was unquestionably the best he saw. And he was a selector, but that was the worry they had.
Shame, what a pity. So his career was cut very short by injury.
Oh yeah, his shoulder. I mean, he coached at Old Boys too after that, so at a young age, and often we'd be doing exercises and his shoulder would just pop out.
Yeah.
It was terrible to watch.
What a pity. What a pity. Brian, talking about fly-offs, another wonderful player, Barry John, died recently. Did you ever come up against him? Or?
Yeah, I played against him in 1968. The Lions came to Rhodesia and played against him and Gareth Edwards. They were both Cardiff players. And
yes.
Played for the Lions, well, Wales and then the Lions. And special, very special. And Phil Bennett was also on that tour.
Yes.
And the only time he came in was when Barry was injured. So, and you remember what a great fly-off he was.
Yes, so, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Barry John got out at a very early age, and great pity because just a wonderful player.
Wonderful player. And Brian, because I'm a Manika, Tini Martin, how do you rate Tini?
Tini was right behind Ian Bond. Tini was a great fly-off, lovely guy. Probably too nice to be playing rugby. Just an absolute. Yeah. He must have gone to PE before he went to Umtali, I think.
No, actually, Tini went to school. I think he went to PAR. He didn't go to school in.
Yeah, he was in South Africa, definitely.
In Rhodesia, but then he went to university, and I think he failed all his exams. And his old man told him to get his ass back to the farm. They say if Tini had stayed in South Africa at Stellenbosch, his rugby career would have probably followed a different trajectory. But old Martins Martin didn't take any prisoners when you failed your exams. He was told to get back to Inyazura.
He had very strict parents. And Donnie's cousin, they all farmed in that Udzi, not Rasapi, Udzi Inyazura. In fact, they played for IY, both of them.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, do you? I mean, that was actually, I think, almost the height of IY's powers when those late 60s. They had a hell of a rugby team there in Inyazura. There was old man de Klerk. I think Pete de Klerk was still around.
Yep.
Des Smith, who played for Rhodesia.
Yes, wing. Yeah.
There were Ernie Hartley, John Anderson. All those guys were playing rugby. Yes. Yeah.
Dirk Stafford was actually in the army with us, with Bert and I, in the same platoon and everything in 66. And then we played against him in 67 and onwards. Also a lovely guy and a hell of a strong wing, very strong man, that. Very strong.
Yeah, it was those Afrikaans farming areas that really produced a bunch of fantastic rugby players that made Manikla rugby so strong.
Yeah. In fact, in those days, we used to have a inter-club competition. And the top club in Mashonaland, Madabeleland, Midlands and Manika used to play. And IY were the side to beat, unquestionably. And I think we beat them a couple of times, but it was pretty much the same. It was a flip of a coin who was going to win. Yeah, but they stuck together. I remember in one Rhodesian game we went away to watch, to play. We ended up in Boksburg, I think it was, yeah. we were housed in Boksburg, playing against Transvaal and Western Transvaal. And the next minute, there were 5 Manikas in the team, and they had moved everything out of their rooms and made one room with 5 beds in it. And that was Tini Shawani, Dirk Crawford. They were good fun guys. Another guy, Goodrich, Marshall Goodrich, front row. They were a lovely bunch. Yeah, they really were.
Brian, I mean, there's so much to talk about and so much I want to ask you about, but we're mentioning Benoni and tough guys, and you're looking back on your rugby career, coming up against those South African teams. Who were the tough guys, and which were the memorably tough games? I mean, I'm sure you had plenty, but ones that stick in your mind.
I think Northern Transvaal, because every time you looked at them, you had to look up. They were so tall and so big, so it became automatic to look up to them. And I don't think we were ever scared of them, but it wasn't a game you wanted to play every week. They were tough guys and big guys. I mean, their front rows, when their front rows stood there, it looked like 2 teams against you. They were big, they were strong, and a couple of them were mobile too. Tace Lawrence used to captain them in those days on the flank, and he was like a midget in the side. But no, they were a good side. Western Province were always a good side. They always had great players. Jannie Engelbrecht comes to mind, and John Gainsford.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they were superstars and could do all sorts of things. We were up against it. It was semi-pro in South Africa then.
Yes.
And Rhodesia, obviously, we had no money. I mean, we were lucky to get a blazer out of. Normally, my first blazer I bought, they didn't give you a blazer. Later on, they did give blazers out, but we were never a wealthy union, so rugby was difficult. And
I mean, just you said it was semi-pro. Rhodesia, you guys very seldom had a chance to practice. You often got together a day or two before the big game. Is that right?
Well, 2 days would have been a miracle. Usually 1 day. Yeah, day before the Bulawayo. There was only a couple of Midlands guys. Mike Mulligan comes to mind immediately. That could drive 160 k's to Salisbury for a practice. The Manika guys were closer to 100 k's. So we never had that much practice, no. And Desmond Yarsfeld was coaching us, and sometimes Des would give us a hell of a workout on a Friday, and we'd only wake up at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning and have to get ready to play a game. So that was not the right tactics in those days. But there was nothing we could do about it. They didn't have the money.
Incredible how well you did in spite of such meager resources. But Brian, am I right when I say, on the whole, the Rhodesian front rows held their own against most sides? It was if we had a problem, it was with our locks. We just didn't have the big enough guys in the lineouts and stuff. But the front rows were pretty much held their own over the years.
Yeah, very much so. Dick Coleshaw, Butch Van Orsten, what was the guy from Midlands? Who?
Keith Nicholson.
Keith Nicholson, Ron, yes, yeah.
James Craven.
James, yeah, he was from Midlands, yeah. He was related to Darnie Craven, actually.
Was he?
Yes, he was, yeah. And very strong and very enthusiastic. And just loved playing for Rhodesia, because you got a free meal, he said. He was a lovely guy, yeah.
Brian, do you remember that famous or infamous incident with Rob Halstead and Mona van Heerden when Rob Halstead was sent off the field?
Yeah, in fact, I was coaching the side in those days. That was against Transvaal, and Transvaal had a full Springbok pack, huge pack, and Robert just had enough, been pushed around, just kicked Mona in the head. And I remember talking to Mona after the game and apologising on behalf of Rob because he wasn't going to do it. I said, anyway, how are you feeling? He says, when I hold my nose, I can just hear Cape Town. His ears blocked up, everything. Rob gave him a good kick. Yeah.
But is a gentle giant, I'm told. Mona van Heerden, formidable on the field, but just a real gent off the field.
Oh, fabulous guy off the field. Really, battled to speak English, but made sure he spoke English. He said, I've spoken it quite well, eh? Just absolute pleasure to play against. There was never anything in Rhodesia. There was no threat for him. So he didn't have to employ dirty tactics at all. I know I've seen him do things against international sides, and he admits to them and gives reference and says why. And I'm not going to argue with him. So his word was law. So that was fine.
There's a wonderful story I picked up just the other day because with the death of JPR Williams, the 74 tour, when they had that code where for everybody to get stuck in, and JPR came screaming in from the wing and belted Mona van Heerden, I think, from behind. It gave him a good clout, and they met years later, and JPR Williams apologized, and Mona van Heerden said, no, you got nothing to apologize for at all. It was, I deserved everything I got kind of thing. It was just the way he was.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how he was. Nothing fazed him after the game. When the game finished, everything else, he was friends with everybody. He never bore a grudge. He was just that kind of person. And if you wanted to mess with him, good luck. He'd find you. And he found a lot of guys.
Brian, talk a bit about Ian Robertson, who sadly is not with us anymore and not able to talk about himself, but another sort of rugby phenomenon, I would say.
Yes and no. To find a guy who worked as hard as him, in the modern day it was Ray Mort, but he worked with Ian Robertson. Ian grafted his butt off. I mean, he lived at our place for, I think it was 4 odd years. And we'd get up at 5 every morning and train. My dad bought us some weights so we could do exercises with him. Then we'd go for a run to the copy, come back, have a shower and go to work. Lunchtime, we'd play touch rugby at Grant Stadium. That was Old Boys ground at the beginning. And later on moved to Milton Park where Old Boys were. We'd play lunchtime touch. And then every evening we'd train. And Robertson wanted to be in front 24-24. Yeah, there was no, he didn't like coming second. So he was just fitter than everybody. He got stronger than everybody. He was just a phenomenal guy. He was so set on becoming a Springbok. And the sad part about it is he should have been made a Springbok long before he was. And I wish he had played after that. It was like, for him, it was really, there we are, I made it now. So, okay, cheers, guys. I'm out of here. No, he was a great player, an asset to any side he played for.
I think he played fly, centre and fullback for South Africa. I mean, he could play just about anywhere, couldn't he?
Yeah, in fact, he played centre on the 74 tour overseas to France. We went over to watch him, and he played exceptionally well. He set up the first try with wing Oosthuizen. He set up the second try, and those were the only 2 tries they scored against France in that game in Toulouse. Yeah. No, he was dedicated, worked on his game, worked on his kicking. I think in the time that he stayed with us, which was 4 years, he must have had 25 jobs. Because any argument about leaving at 4:30, he was gone. Didn't worry about picking up a check or anything. He just left and phoned them the next morning. He lived to play rugby. Yeah.
Mm. Well, he certainly was a joy to watch. One of the most polished players I can remember watching. The way he moved around a rugby field, it was just almost like a ballerina on a rugby field.
Good description. Yes. Yeah. He was. No, he was a class act. Very much so. Mm.
Brian David Smith as a centre, one of the great centres that Rhodesia produced.
Yeah, again, sad. Played in one series for South Africa, and not again. But Dave's got a small head, and if you look at the guys who get concussed a lot, they've all got small heads. And I'm not saying Dave should have been big-headed in any way. I mean, his makeup was a small head. He was a fabulous centre. Could take a gap. Main gap was outside because of his immense pace
and his stride.
Yeah, and also he tripped most guys or threw them down. He didn't really tackle them. But 78, him and Alan Mansfield were a really good combination. And yeah, David Smith was destined to be a Springbok from the first time I saw him play for Police. Deservedly got it, but a bit late, I think. And sadly, that was it. Yeah.
Brian, take your mind back to Leroy Duberly, fullback, fearless tackler. Were you playing at that time? I think you were when he got killed in the game against Natal. Were you in the?
I was the coach then. Yeah. I wasn't playing. Yeah. In fact, Leroy used to stay with us when he came up to, he's a Bulawayo guy, so he was a tech for 4 years. So he played for Old Boys in that time, not Queens. And he used to live at my mum's place. So, yeah, we were pretty close with him. And, yeah, it was a very sad occasion.
Apparently, I'm not sure if this is correct, but he needn't have gone on that operation. He was given an option to opt out. Because of, I think, for rugby reasons, but he insisted on going, and he never came back. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I spoke to him at least 5 times prior to it, saying, "Geez, you got to come. We need you against Natal." And he said, "Look, if this operation takes place, it's external, and I've never been external, and yes, I want to do that." So that was it. Yeah, sadly.
Brian, talking about matters military, and we're here to talk about sport, but your rugby career, I mean, you ended up in the SAS, a fighting soldier, so you were also taken off the rugby field periodically to go and do your bit. How did you manage that with playing rugby, being a fighting soldier and deployed on some very arduous missions?
I think it was the same for all of us, Hannes. We all had to do call-ups. There was no way out of that. We were lucky enough that the military guys had a good rapport with Rhodesian selectors, and we got off for, I would say, 99% of the games. We always had the option, as Leroy had in those days. But guys were, patriotic. I think, most of the guys wanted to do their army, but they didn't want to be known as Sky, but to sneak out of it. So that was the case for most of the people. Yeah.
Brian, have you seen a photograph of that Salou Scout rugby team that was put together? I think they only played one game.
Yes, I have. Yeah. It was a good side.
What an incredible team! I think they're about 9 or 10 Rhodesian players in
Colin Blythewood, Luke Bowlby, Rob Holstead.
Billy Lemon.
Yeah, Billy. Geez, at centre, yeah.
Geez, man, Neil Creel.
Neil never played for Rhodesia.
He played Rhodesia schools, I think.
Schools, yeah.
Yeah,
He was a great
yes.
boy, and then he went straight into the army, and he ended up a major in Slough Scouts. He died last year. Yeah.
No, but what a team. They only played one game. I'm not sure who it was against.
I don't know either. He was pretty much the same time as I was, and he went to Stellenbosch University and did well there with another guy, Rob Berry, who played fly half for Stellenbosch. And then you had those two brothers that played fullback and centre for Stellenbosch and South Africa. I forget their names now.
Du Plessis.
Sorry?
Du Plessis.
I just got a blank on.
Michael, that doesn't matter.
I remember Michael Du Plessis and Carl was the wing.
Yes.
But yeah, it was those two. Yeah, definitely.
The story, I think, behind that Slough Scouts thing, if I'm right, it was Noel Roby, I think, who went into a pub and he got into an argument with these guys. It was one of the rugby clubs. And he said, if we put a team together, we'd fuck anybody up. And he ended up getting fucked up by these guys. And he went back and told Reed Daly what had happened. And Reed Daly said, right, let's get busy. And he called everybody in from their deployments, whatever, said, get your asses in here. We're putting this team together to go and play against that particular team. And they went off and beat the hell out of them. But that's the story there, as I remember it. And the only game they ever played.
Yeah, and that's 100% right. But Ron Reed Daly coached RLI when he was at RLI, and RLI won the league in 1965. They won the Mashonaland League. Matabeleland were probably as strong as Mashonaland in those days, but RLI were a very strong side.
Yeah.
And I certainly played against them in '66, and they were a tough side, very tough.
Brian, if I think I'm right in saying Ron Reed Daly was actually picked to coach Rhodesia, but it was the war was escalating, and he felt he couldn't do both jobs, and he declined, and that's when Ian McIntosh actually got the job.
It was actually Des van Jaarsveld and Ron Reed Daly that were up for the coaching the side, 65, 66. And yes, quite rightly, as you said, Des got the job because Ron didn't feel he had enough time to work at the RLI. I think he was RSM of RLI then. And he could do that and coach the rugby side. But a very keen rugby man. And by what he did for RLI was phenomenal. And there were a few of the RLI guys that made Rhodesia as well. Lloyd Evans comes to mind, the centre.
And Hugh Rowley?
Hugh Rowley as well he played many games.
I remember watching him. No, Ron, he loved his rugby. In his twilight years, I had some special times with him watching rugby. He knew the game so well, and he loved. He loved rugby. He really did, old Ron.
Oh no, just a lovely person, a great guy, a real man's man.
Brian,
and he didn't mince words when he talked to the team too.
Very direct, old Ron. Brian, Ian Smith, how much did you have to do with him over the years as a player and one thing and another? I know he loved coming to the games.
I was lucky in that Ian Smith was a pilot in 237 Squadron, a Rhodesian Spitfire Squadron, and my father was in 237 Squadron. Not a pilot, though, radio operator.
Right.
So they spent time in Africa, North Africa mainly, and then went across to Italy. That's where Smithy got shot down.
Right.
I knew I could drive to his house and talk to him. He was that kind of person. He lived just behind Royal, and just a lovely person. And Janet as well. Very nice people. And most of the 237 and 44 squadron guys were housed in Belvedere when the war finished. And that's where we lived. That's where Smithy lived before he went farming. And Alan and Clive Kluko, and there were a lot of us whose parents were in 237 Squadron in Belvedere. Yeah. And it's quite strange. I now live in Belvedere in Knysna.
Really. And Brian, old Ian Smith managed to survive being protected by Pete Lombard, who played a few games for Rhodesia. Lombies was at some stage his close security. From what I can gather, what he did most of the time was sell Janet Smith's vegetables at Sports Club.
That sounds like Lombies, yeah. In fact, I had a car sales stand in Union Avenue, and Smithy would often come walking past, pop in, have a cup of tea, and then go next door to Smarter Hairdresser to have a haircut. All by himself. 10 minutes after he left, in would arrive his squad, 2 cars, 4 motorbikes. Has Smith been here? Yeah. Where's he now? Don't know. He's not here. But that was, he liked sneaking out and doing his own thing. Very much a people's person. He walked down the road, he'd talk to everybody.
Yes.
And we talked every other day, just a lovely person.
Brian, back to rugby. Memorable games that really stick in your mind, where you probably you won the game, but you played a lot of rugby. But which games really stick in your mind?
I think all the major tests, like against the Lions, New Zealand, Australia, England. Who else did we play? We never played. Oh, we did play against Ireland. So all those games, obviously, because of the foreign element and how good were we, always the comparison. Like the 74 Lions were fairly unique, whereas the 80 Lions were not that good. But Currie Cup games, beating Transvaal the one year, I remember that game well. Beating Natal, it was always the 2 English-speaking sides. That was always a good battle, and they were always nice games to play.
We beat Western Province in 78, I think. Morné du Plessis, Willem Coetzee.
I was coaching then, yeah. In fact, I was out the night before with John Gainsford, and we had an early morning return so we were talking about the sides then and saying who's good and who's bad, and what a great player Morné was, which he was. But Gainsford went on a little bit longer about every guy on their side, how good they were. I said, well, why haven't you won the Currie Cup? Northern Transvaal dominated in those days. It was the start of Naas Botha, and they just dominated everything because of that big pack of forwards that they had. But every game against Western Province, Natal, were exciting games. I enjoyed all those games. The games against Northerns and Transvaal were actually quite boring because you could figure out early on in the game what they were going to do. And they never changed. So So they pounded forward at us. Yeah.
Brian, I remember the one game where you took a long throw at the line out and ran off and scored a try. Was that against Northern Transvaal or Transvaal? It was at the police ground. It was a brilliant move, and they went for a long throw. You caught the defence flat-footed, and I seem to remember it was you that scored the try.
No, I can't remember it offhand, but we used the long throw quite a lot, Ian Robertson and myself. But we practiced it a lot at Old Boys. So the end result was it wasn't going into a game and trying something new. You went into a game knowing you could do it, so it was part of your armory. And I think that's where we were reasonably successful against the South African sides. But you can keep them going for so long. And in those days, fitness was it was a thought, but it wasn't a priority. Because you got together so seldom. People like James Craven, he had nowhere to train. How did he keep fit? That was the problem we had. Whereas, you look at Cape Town and Pretoria and Joburg and Bloemfontein, they could get together every night of the week and practice as a team. For us, it was actually introducing ourselves to each other. How's it going in Bulawayo? How's it going in Umtali? What's happening there? When did you get out the army? There was nothing rugby taught. So from that point of view, we were behind. Yeah.
Talking about Mulligan, the other guy from the Air Force who played good rugby was Danny Svoboda and scored that try against New Zealand that one year.
Correct, in the right-hand corner, amazing. Danny, in races we would have, would be in the last 5 every single time. He was that slow compared to everybody else in the team. But if you gave a ball to James Craven, he would pass it straight away because he didn't know what he should have done because they hadn't been worked on. So that, and Butch van Orsten too. He scored against France. Without dummying them, he dummied half their team. He never practiced that, but he scored against France. And I drove too under the pulse. So what we lacked was cohesion and togetherness. When I became a coach and had input with the selectors, I always used to think and say the same thing. If the 2 guys are the same, pick the guy who plays with the top team. Unfortunately, people looked at that and said, well, that was Old Boys' favor. It probably was. But I'd prefer to have a person who knows the guy next to him and played with him for a long time, like centres, as opposed to a new guy every time you play. So once you pick your team, hopefully, which didn't happen in the early years, but in the latter years, it certainly did in the 70s, is pick your team and try and stay with it. If you can stay with it, you're 3/4 of the way to being a successful side. Yeah.
Brian, a little bit about Ray Mort. If I'm not sure I'm 100% right, but I don't think he stood out as a rugby player at school. I think he went to Churchill. Didn't shine at rugby. Is that correct? It really came later.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And he went to sports club, and then he approached Ian Robertson to coach him. And they worked on fitness. And my God, did they work on fitness? They used to do hills at the university, sprinting up those hills, and Ray became as dedicated as Ian Robertson was. He would wake up in the morning, train, go to bed at night, train. He was a fitness fanatic, and still is to this day. He goes to gym every day. He's that kind of person. He's very, very, very well disciplined, and he was always a pleasure to have on the side because you knew what you were getting, 100%. That's what it was, yeah.
And Danny Delport was a little less disciplined and committed, but a tremendous flair on the wing.
Yeah, you say a little bit less. He was 100% for Danny Delport. he just enjoyed. He loved playing. He didn't care who he was playing against. You know, when somebody would say to him, "You're playing against Edric Krantz, and hell, he's a good winger." Who? Edric Krantz. I'm not worried about that. He was never worried. He would tackle locks, never worried about a thing. The trouble was he never passed. So Danny died with the ball quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once he got a hold of that ball, he wasn't going to let it go. Yeah. But he was a great wing for Rhodesia. He really was.
Yeah, I can remember some of those runs of his. They were electrifying. You know, he had amazing swerve, and he just managed to make a lot of distance.
Yeah,
Brian?
and he's playing with David Smith at club level helped the two of them a lot, because then when they came to the Rhodesian side, it was easy. You know, they knew each other backwards, so it was just getting to know Alan Mansfield, and that was it. And when the fullback was going to come into the line, so that's all they had to know. So it was pretty simple.
Brian, Alan Sutherland arrives on the scene. How did that happen? And just what sort of impact did he have on Rhodesian rugby?
Ian Robertson went over to New Zealand, organised by Sutherland, who was going out with Vera then. So he organised for Ian Robertson to come over and play a couple of games for them.
I see.
Which he did. Ian came back and said, you know, I think we can get Alan Sutherland to come to Rhodesia and play here. Because in those days, that's how it was. You know, you could go play for any team. You didn't have to live in Cape Town to play for Western Province. But you'd have to move there if you wanted to stay in the team.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. So there was a lot of swapping. Sully came to Rhodesia, and he just gave the guys confidence. You know, he said, who are these people we're playing against? I don't know any of them. And the guys would say, well, you wouldn't. You live in New Zealand. He said, well, if they were good, I'd know about it. So, you know, the opposition was never a threat to him. He was a very different player in that he was big, strong, and took gaps that weren't there. But he managed to get through. He was fantastic for Rhodesian rugby. He gave the guys a lot of confidence. They all totally believed in him. You know, he played his club rugby at Old Boys. I would say we were fairly close with him. You know, he was certainly one of us in the end.
Yeah.
And sadly, he moved to Transvaal, but, you know, it was all a case of money in those days.
Yeah.
And Transvaal offered him a good deal. He ended up there, but he loved his time in Rhodesia. Always did, and he got on well with most of the people there. Very straight talking. If you had a bad game, there was no mincing words. No, he was a great influence for Rhodesian rugby. Yeah, and did a great job.
And then Brian, Kevin Everleek, he came after that.
Yeah, Kev came. I think it was 2 years after Sully was there. Didn't really have a big impact. You know, hard-working, like all those New Zealand guys, you know, they run into walls. We had never done that. We thought the wall was there for a reason. They thought it was there to be broken down. It was a very different attitude to what we had. I don't think he had much of an impact, no.
And the state of the game today, what's your take on modern day rugby? Where's it going?
Very, very predictable. You know the scrum half's going to kick a high one. You know the wing's going to try and catch it. You know the forwards are going to go in there to stop other people going forward. So to me, there's too many negatives in rugby now. There's not enough positives.
And not enough flair.
There's no. There's absolutely no flair. It doesn't matter who you watch playing. the guys are, you will do this, and it's like robots. Everybody does what they have to do, and nobody thinks, well, geez, if I break now, I could score. But no, hang on, you've got to get it to the wing, so get it to the wing. So, yeah, I actually don't enjoy watching rugby anymore. I don't think, there's not that much excitement. I think they should look more at trying to score than trying to keep possession. That's just my thoughts on it. And I'm no one to comment on it because I don't watch enough of it. Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for your time. It's been very, very interesting, and I know a hell of a lot of people are going to enjoy listening to this talk. And I just want to thank you again for all you did for rugby in Rhodesia and all you did for us by making us very proud of our rugby team.
Thank you, Hannes. Very kind of you.